Apple iOS is the second most popular mobile operating system. As of June 2021, Apple iOS held a 26.3% share of the mobile phone market, second only to Android, which held a 73.3% market share. The first version of iOS was released in June 2007, when the iPhone debuted on the market. iOS, an acronym for iPhone Operating System, is a Unix-derived operating system powering all of Apple's mobile devices. The name iOS was not officially applied to the software until 2008, when Apple released the iPhone Software Development Kit, SDK, enabling any app makers to create applications for the platform. The popularity of the iPhone is often attributed to the user-centric design and effectiveness of iOS. Nearly 218 million iPhones were sold by the end of 2018, making the device the single most successful product ever released into the market. Some estimates show that since their launch in 2007, iOS products have been responsible for more than $1 trillion in revenue for Apple. iOS, formerly iPhone Operating System, Multi-Platform Operating System, OS, created and developed by Apple Incorporated for its iPhone. The platform formerly also supported the company's iPad, until 2019, and iPod Touch, until 2022, devices. The software is based on Mac OS X, after 2016, Mac OS, which Apple has used since 2001 to power its Macintosh computers. In turn, iOS was the template for watchOS, tvOS, and iPadOS, the systems that support Apple Watch, Apple TV, and iPad, respectively. In 2022, iOS remained the second most installed mobile OS in the world. The debut of iOS on the first-generation iPhone in 2007 was a significant advance on existing multi-touch technology, which enables users to operate computers with contact pressure, such as via a stylus or hand gesture. The system's update in 2008, which allowed users to buy new applications from third-party developers, made the iPhone not only a financial success but one of the most significant new consumer products of the 21st century. When Apple Incorporated began developing the iPhone in 2005, the company already marketed and sold the iPod, a compact media player, and the Mac, a desktop computer. American businessman and Apple Incorporated co-founder and CEO Steve Jobs was faced with the decision of whether to achieve the new product's desired functionality by scaling up the OS of the iPod or scaling down the Mac OS. Rather than choose outright, Jobs placed the engineering teams responsible for each device in competition with each other. The team behind the Mac OS X, led by Vice Pres. Scott Forstall, won the race by successfully running the Mac OS on an iPhone prototype. iOS, formerly iPhone OS, is a mobile operating system developed by Apple Incorporated exclusively for its hardware. It is the operating system that powers many of the company's mobile devices, including the iPhone. The term also includes the system software for iPads, predating iPadOS, which was introduced in 2019, as well as on the iPod Touch devices, which were discontinued in mid-2022. It is the world's second most widely installed mobile operating system, after Android. It is the basis for 3 other operating systems made by Apple: iPadOS, tvOS, and watchOS. It is proprietary software, although some parts of it are open source under the Apple Public Source License and other licenses. Unveiled in 2007 for the first-generation iPhone, iOS has since been extended to support other Apple devices such as the iPod Touch, September 2007, and the iPad, introduced, January 2010, availability, April 2010. As of March 2018, Apple's App Store contains more than 2.1 million iOS applications, 1 million of which are native for iPads. These mobile apps have collectively been downloaded more than 130 billion times. Major versions of iOS are released annually. The current stable version, iOS 17, was released to the public on September 18, 2023. In 2005, When Steve Jobs began planning the iPhone, he had a choice to either shrink the Mac, which would be an epic feat of engineering, or enlarge the iPod. Jobs favored the former approach but pitted the Macintosh and iPod teams, led by Scott Forstall and Tony Fadell, respectively, against each other in an internal competition, with Forstall winning by creating the iPhone OS. The decision enabled the success of the iPhone as a platform for third-party developers. Using a well-known desktop operating system as its basis allowed the many third-party Mac developers to write software for the iPhone with minimal retraining. Forstall was also responsible for creating a software development kit for programmers to build iPhone apps, as well as an app store within iTunes. The operating system was unveiled with the iPhone at the Macworld Conference and Expo on January 9, 2007, and released in June of that year. At the time of its unveiling in January, Steve Jobs claimed, "iPhone runs OS X and runs desktop-class applications," but at the time of the iPhone's release, the operating system was renamed iPhone OS. Initially, third-party native applications were not supported. Jobs' reasoning was that developers could build web applications through the Safari web browser that would behave like native apps on the iPhone. In October 2007, Apple announced that a native software development kit, SDK, was under development and that they planned to put it in developers' hands in February. On March 6, 2008, Apple held a press event, announcing the iPhone SDK. The iOS App Store was opened on July 10, 2008, with an initial 500 applications available. This quickly grew to 3,000 in September 2008, 15,000 in January 2009, 50,000 in June 2009, 100,000 in November 2009, 250,000 in August 2010, 650,000 in July 2012, 1 million in October 2013, 2 million in June 2016, and 2.2 million in January 2017. As of March 2016, 1 million apps are natively compatible with the iPad tablet computer. These apps have collectively been downloaded more than 130 billion times. App intelligence firm Sensor Tower estimated that the App Store would reach 5 million apps by 2020. In September 2007, Apple announced the iPod Touch, a redesigned iPod based on the iPhone form factor. On January 27, 2010, Apple introduced their much-anticipated media tablet, the iPad, featuring a larger screen than the iPhone and iPod Touch, and designed for web browsing, media consumption, and reading, and offering multi-touch interaction with multimedia formats including newspapers, e-books, photos, videos, music, word processing documents, video games, and most existing iPhone apps using a 9.7-inch, 25 cm, screen. It also includes a mobile version of Safari for web browsing, as well as access to the App Store, iTunes Library, iBookstore, Contacts, and Notes. Content is downloadable via Wi-Fi and optional 3G service or synced through the user's computer. AT&T was initially the sole U.S. provider of 3G wireless access for the iPad. In June 2010, Apple rebranded iPhone OS as iOS. The trademark iOS had been used by Cisco for over a decade for its operating system, iOS, used on its routers. To avoid any potential lawsuit, Apple licensed the iOS trademark from Cisco. The Apple Watch smartwatch was announced by Tim Cook on September 9, 2014, being introduced as a product with health and fitness tracking. It was released on April 24, 2015. It uses watchOS as its operating system. watchOS is based on iOS, with new features created specially for the Apple Watch such as an activity tracking app. In October 2016, Apple opened its first iOS Developer Academy in Naples inside University of Naples Federico II's new campus. The course is completely free, aimed at acquiring specific technical skills on the creation and management of applications for the Apple ecosystem platforms. At the Academy there are also issues of business administration, business planning and business management with a focus on digital opportunities, and there is a path dedicated to the design of graphical interfaces. Students have the opportunity to participate in the Enterprise track, an in-depth training experience on the entire life cycle of an app, from design to implementation, to security, troubleshooting, data storage, and cloud usage. As of 2020, the Academy graduated almost 1,000 students from all over the world, who have worked on 400 app ideas and have already published about 50 apps on the iOS App Store. In the 2018 to 2019 academic year, students from more than 30 countries arrived. 35 of these have been selected to attend the Worldwide Developer Conference, the annual Apple Developer Conference held annually in California in early June. The iOS user interface is based upon direct manipulation, using multi-touch gestures such as swipe, tap, pinch, and reverse pinch. Interface control elements include sliders, switches, and buttons. Internal accelerometers are used by some applications to respond to shaking the device. One common result is the undo command, or rotating it in 3 dimensions. One common result is switching between portrait and landscape mode. Various accessibility described in accessibility functions enable users with vision and hearing disabilities to properly use iOS. iOS devices boot to the home screen, the primary navigation and information hub on iOS devices, analogous to the desktop found on personal computers. iOS home screens are typically made up of app icons and widgets. App icons launch the associated app, whereas widgets display live, auto-updating content, such as a weather forecast, the user's email inbox, or a news ticker directly on the home screen. Along the top of the screen is a status bar, showing information about the device and its connectivity. The status bar itself contains 2 elements, the control center and the notification center. The control center can be pulled down from the top right of the notch, on the new iPhones, giving access to various toggles to manage the device more quickly without having to open the settings. It is possible to manage brightness, volume, wireless connections, music player, etc. Instead, scrolling from the top left to the bottom will open the notification center, which in the latest versions of iOS is very similar to the lock screen. It displays notifications in chronological order and groups them by application. From the notifications of some apps it is possible to interact directly, for example by replying a message directly from it. Notifications are sent in 2 modes, the important notifications that are displayed on the lock screen and signaled by a distinctive sound, accompanied by a warning banner and the app badge icon, and the secondary mode where they are displayed in the notification center, but they are not shown on the lock screen, nor are they indicated by warning banners, badge icons, or sounds. On earlier iPhones with home button, screenshots can be created with the simultaneous press of the home and power buttons. In comparison to Android OS, which requires the buttons to be held down, a short press does suffice on iOS. On the more recent iPhones which lack a physical home button, screenshots are captured using the volume up and power buttons instead. The camera application used a skeuomorphic closing camera shutter animation prior to iOS 7. Since then, it uses a simple short blackout effect. Notable additions over time include HDR photography and the option to save both normal and high dynamic range photographs simultaneously, where the former prevents ghosting effects from moving objects. Since iPhone 5, iOS 6, automatic HDR adjustment, iOS 7.1, live photo with short video bundled to each photo if enabled, iPhone 6s, iOS 9, and a digital zoom shortcut, iPhone 7 Plus, iOS 10. Some camera settings such as video resolution and frame rate are not adjustable through the camera interface itself, but are outsourced to the system settings. A new feature in iOS 13 called Context Menus shows related actions when you touch and hold an item. When the context menu is displayed, the background is blurred. To choose from a few options, a selection control is used. Selectors can appear anchored at the bottom or in line with the content, called date selectors. Date selectors take on the appearance of any other selection control, but with a column for day, month, and optionally year. Alerts appear in the center of the screen, but there are also alerts that scroll up from the bottom of the screen, called action panels. Destructive actions, such as eliminating any element, are colored red. The official font of iOS is San Francisco. It is designed for small text readability, and is used throughout the operating system, including third-party apps. The icons are 180x 180px in size for iPhones with a larger screen, usually models over 6 inches, including iPhone 11 Pro and iPhone 8 Plus, while they are 120x 120px on iPhones with smaller displays. On June 3, 2019, iPadOS, the branded version of iOS for iPad, was announced at the 2019 WWDC. It was launched on September 25, 2019. iOS devices come with pre-installed apps developed by Apple including Mail, Maps, TV, Music, FaceTime, Wallet, Health, and many more. Applications, apps, are the most general form of application software that can be installed on iOS. They are downloaded from the official catalog of the App Store digital store, where apps are subjected to security checks before being made available to users. In June 2017, Apple updated its guidelines to specify that app developers will no longer have the ability to use custom prompts for encouraging users to leave reviews for their apps. iOS applications can also be installed directly from an IPA file provided by the software distributor, via unofficial ways. They are written using iOS Software Development Kit, SDK, and, often, combined with Xcode, using officially supported programming languages, including Swift and Objective-C. Other companies have also created tools that allow for the development of native iOS apps using their respective programming languages. Applications for iOS are mostly built using components of UIKit, a programming framework. It allows applications to have a consistent look and feel with the OS, nevertheless offering customization. Elements automatically update along with iOS updates, automatically including new interface rules. UIKit elements are very adaptable. This allows developers to design a single app that looks the same on any iOS device. In addition to defining the iOS interface, UIKit defines the functionality of the application. At first, Apple did not intend to release an SDK to developers, because they did not want third-party apps to be developed for iOS, building web apps instead. However, this technology never entered into common use. This led Apple to change its opinion, so in October 2007 the SDK for developers was announced, finally released on March 6, 2008. The SDK includes an inclusive set of development tools, including an audio mixer and an iPhone simulator. It is a free download for Mac users. It is not available for Microsoft Windows PCs. To test the application, get technical support, and distribute applications through App Store, developers are required to subscribe to the Apple Developer Program. Over the years, the Apple Store apps surpassed multiple major milestones, including 50,000, 100,000, 250,000, 500,000, 1 million, and 2 million apps. The billionth application was installed on April 24, 2009. The home screen, rendered by Springboard, displays application icons and a dock at the bottom where users can pin their most frequently used apps. The home screen appears whenever the user unlocks the device, presses the physical home button while in an app, or swipes up from the bottom of the screen using the home bar. Before iOS 4 on the iPhone 3GS, or later, the screen's background could be customized only through jailbreaking, but can now be changed out of the box. The screen has a status bar across the top to display data, such as time, battery level, and signal strength. The rest of the screen is devoted to the current application. When a passcode is set and a user switches on the device, the passcode must be entered at the lock screen before access to the home screen is granted. In iPhone OS 3, Spotlight was introduced, allowing users to search media, apps, emails, contacts, messages, reminders, calendar events, and similar content. In iOS 7 and later, Spotlight is accessed by pulling down anywhere on the home screen, except for the top and bottom edges that open Notification Center and Control Center. In iOS 9, there are two ways to access Spotlight. As with iOS 7 and 8, pulling down on any home screen will show Spotlight. However, it can also be accessed as it was in iOS versions 3 through 6. This endows Spotlight with Siri suggestions, which include app suggestions, contact suggestions, and news. In iOS 10, Spotlight is at the top of the now dedicated Today panel. Since iOS 3.2, users are able to set a background image for the home screen. This feature is only available on third-generation devices iPhone 3GS, third-generation iPod Touch, iOS 4.0 or newer, and all iPad models, since iOS 3.2, or newer. iOS 7 introduced a parallax effect on the home screen, which shifts the device's wallpaper and icons in response to the movement of the device, creating a 3D effect and an illusion of floating icons. This effect is also visible in the tab view of Mail and Safari. Researchers found that users organize icons on their home screens based on usage frequency and relatedness of the applications, as well as for reasons of usability and aesthetics. iOS originally used Helvetica as the system font. Apple switched to Helvetica Neue exclusively for the iPhone 4 and its Retina display, and retained Helvetica as the system font for older iPhone devices on iOS 4. With iOS 7, Apple announced that they would change the system font to Helvetica Neue Light, a decision that sparked criticism for inappropriate usage of a light, thin typeface for low-resolution mobile screens. Apple eventually chose Helvetica Neue instead. The release of iOS 7 also introduced the ability to scale text or apply other forms of text accessibility changes through settings. With iOS 9, Apple changed the font to San Francisco, an Apple-designed font aimed at maximum legibility and font consistency across its product lineup. Folders. iOS 4 introduced folders, which can be created by dragging an application on top of another, and from then on, more items can be added to the folder using the same procedure. A title for the folder is automatically selected by the category of applications inside, but the name can also be edited by the user. When apps inside folders receive notification badges, the individual numbers of notifications are added up and the total number is displayed as a notification badge on the folder itself. Originally, folders on an iPhone could include up to 12 apps, while folders on iPad could include 20. With increasing display sizes on newer iPhone hardware, iOS 7 updated the folders with pages similar to the home screen layout, allowing for a significant expansion of folder functionality. Each page of a folder can contain up to 9 apps, and there can be 15 pages in total, allowing for a total of 135 apps in a single folder. In iOS 9, Apple updated folder sizes for iPad hardware, allowing for 16 apps per page, still at 15 pages maximum, increasing the total to 240 apps. Before iOS 5, notifications were delivered in a modal window and couldn't be viewed after being dismissed. In iOS 5, Apple introduced Notification Center, which allows users to view a history of notifications. The user can tap a notification to open its corresponding app, or clear it. Notifications are now delivered in banners that appear briefly at the top of the screen. If a user taps a received notification, the application that sent the notification will be opened. Users can also choose to view notifications in modal alert windows by adjusting the application's notification settings. Introduced with iOS 8, widgets are now accessible through the Notification Center, defined by third parties. When an app sends a notification while closed, a red badge appears on its icon. This badge tells the user, at a glance, how many notifications that app has sent. Opening the app clears the badge. iOS offers various accessibility features to help users with vision and hearing disabilities. One major feature, VoiceOver, provides a voice reading information on the screen, including contextual buttons, icons, links, and other user interface elements, and allows the user to navigate the operating system through gestures. Any apps with default controls and developed with a UIKit framework gets voice-over functionality built in. One example includes holding up the iPhone to take a photo, with voice-over describing the photo scenery. As part of a Made for iPhone program, introduced with the release of iOS 7 in 2013, Apple has developed technology to use Bluetooth and a special technology protocol to let compatible third-party equipment connect with iPhones and iPads for streaming audio directly to a user's ears. Additional customization available for Made for iPhone products include battery tracking and adjustable sound settings for different environments. Apple made further efforts for accessibility for the release of iOS 10 in 2016, adding a new pronunciation editor to VoiceOver, adding a magnifier setting to enlarge objects through the device's camera, software TTY support for deaf people to make phone calls from the iPhone, and giving tutorials and guidelines for third-party developers to incorporate proper accessibility functions into their apps. Multitasking for iOS was first released in June 2010 along with the release of iOS 4. Only certain devices iPhone 4, iPhone 3GS, and iPod Touch third generation were able to multitask. The iPad did not get multitasking until iOS 4.2.1 in that November. In iOS 4.0 to iOS 6.x, double-clicking the Home button activates the application switcher. A scrollable dock-style interface appears from the bottom, moving the contents of the screen up. Choosing an icon switches to an application. To the far left are icons which function as music controls, a rotation lock, and on iOS 4.2 and above, a volume controller. With the introduction of iOS 7, double-clicking the Home button also activates the application switcher. However, unlike previous versions, it displays screenshots of open applications on top of the icon, and horizontal scrolling allows for browsing through previous apps, and it is possible to close applications by dragging them up, similar to how WebOS handled multiple cards. With the introduction of iOS 9, the application switcher received a significant visual change. While still retaining the card metaphor introduced in iOS 7, the application icon is smaller, and appears above the screenshot, which is now larger, due to the removal of recent and favorite contacts, and each application card overlaps the other, forming a Rolodex effect as the user scrolls. Now, instead of the home screen appearing at the leftmost of the application switcher, it appears rightmost. In iOS 11, the application switcher receives a major redesign. In the iPad, the control center and app switcher are combined. The app switcher in the iPad can also be accessed by swiping up from the bottom. In the iPhone, the app switcher cannot be accessed if there are no apps in the RAM. Ending tasks. In iOS 4.0 to iOS 6.x, briefly holding the icons in the application switcher makes them jiggle, similarly to the home screen, and allows the user to force quit the applications by tapping the red minus circle that appears at the corner of the app's icon. Clearing applications from multitasking stayed the same from iOS 4.0 through 6.1.6, the last version of iOS 6. As of iOS 7, the process has become faster and easier. In iOS 7, instead of holding the icons to close them, they are closed by simply swiping them upwards off the screen. Up to 3 apps can be cleared at a time compared to 1 in versions up to iOS 6.1.6. Apple provides major updates to the iOS operating system annually via iTunes and, since iOS 5, also over the air. The device checks an XML-based list file on mesu.apple.com for updates. Updates are delivered as unencrypted zip files. Updates are checked for regularly, and are downloaded and installed automatically if enabled. Otherwise, the user can install them manually or are prompted to allow automatic installation overnight if plugged in and connected to Wi-Fi. iPod Touch users originally had to pay for system software updates due to accounting rules that designated it not a subscription device like the iPhone or Apple TV, causing many iPod Touch owners not to update. In September 2009, a change in accounting rules won tentative approval, affecting Apple's earnings and stock price, and allowing iPod Touch updates to be delivered free of charge. iOS is the second most popular mobile operating system in the world, after Android. Sales of iPads in recent years are also behind Android, while, by web use, a proxy for all use, iPads, using iOS, are still the most popular. By the middle of 2012, there were 410 million devices activated. At WWDC 2014, Tim Cook said 800 million devices had been sold by June 2014. During Apple's quarterly earnings call in January 2015, the company announced that they had sold over 1 billion iOS devices since 2007. By late 2011, iOS accounted for 60% of the market share for smartphones and tablets. By the end of 2014, iOS accounted for 14.8% of the smartphone market and 27.6% of the tablet and 2-in-1 market. In February 2015, StatCounter reported iOS was used on 23.18% of smartphones and 66.25% of tablets worldwide, measured by internet usage instead of sales. In the third quarter of 2015, research from Strategy Analytics showed that iOS adoption of the worldwide smartphone market was at a record low 12.1%, attributed to lackluster performance in China and Africa. Android accounted for 87.5% of the market, with Windows Phone and BlackBerry accounting for the rest. Thank you for watching this video.